Hi all. So this is a mock interview. Actually, we got some questions from the round one of Unisys interview from one of the candidate. So we are trying to mock the interview with the same questions. So this interview was for the profile of a Java developer, including Java, Java 8, Spring Boot, microservices. So we are starting with the first question. That about class loaders. So what are the class loaders and what are the different types of class loaders?
Yeah, so coming on to the answer, so class loaders are actually a part of JRE that enables dynamically loading of Java classes into JVM. So Java files are actually not loaded all at once. So in order to load Java files, JRE calls Java class loaders to load the classes dynamically into the memory. So this is the purpose of class loaders. Now coming on to the types of class loaders, we have three types of class loaders, that is bootstrap, extension and system. Bootstrap is actually the parent of all class loaders. It is used to load the standard JDK class files from runtime.jar and other core classes. Now we have extension. So it is used to load mainly the libraries and extensions that are there. Apart from that, the third one, that is system. So this loads application specific classes from the class path. That is, all our classes are actually loaded by system class loader.
Okay, so let's go to collections then. Can you please tell me something about Hashmap, its internal structure and its working?
Yeah, so actually Hashmap stores data into key value pairs where the key is unique and value can be duplicate as well, but the key has to be unique. There can be one null key and multiple null values. Hashmap is not synchronized in nature, it is the implementation of map interface. The order of insertion is not maintained in a hash map. Apart from this, if we talk about its internal structure, so as soon as we declare a hash map, initially a 16 bucket size is allotted by default, and as soon as you do a hash map dot put, so using that you can actually add some entries to the hash map. So as soon as you do a hashmap dot put, it actually calculates the bucket onto which it has to insert that particular data in form of node. So how it does that? It actually calculates the hash code and mod of the capacity, which is initially 16. So it does hash code mod 16 of that particular key. Hash code is fetched from the object class implementation of hash code method, and mod 16 is done. So entire, so it will actually land up between 0 to 15. So whatever number it lands up, it actually creates a node on that particular number. Before creating, it also checks if there is some key that is already present using the equals method that is there. So using the equals, it checks, okay, if this particular key is already present, it will replace the previous one. If not, it will create a new node for that.
Okay, one more thing. If the hash map contains some object into it, then what are the necessary things that we need to take care?
Yeah, so if your hash map contains objects, so for customized object, you need to customize your hash map, and in that case you need to override the equals and hash code implementation of object class for your hash map to work properly.
Okay, what if I override only one method, either hashcode or the equals method, and I don't override the other? What's the problem that we can face with that?
So if you suppose override the hash code method, it will return it will work properly in case of hash code only. It will land up to the fine to the that particular bucket. But if you do not override the equals method, it will take the implementation of object class equals method. That means it will check for content along with the reference as well. So in that case, your customized object might not be, if you are creating with new, so every time it will not be equal. Like suppose you have an employee object with the same name, there are two employees, but since it is created with new operator, both of the memory locations are different, so it will treat as different. You can have duplicacy of keys into your particular hash map. And if you do not override, in case you do not override the hash code method and you use the object class one, so in that case it actually calculates based on certain things, the JVM internals algorithm. So in that case you can like land up to different type of buckets.
Okay, okay. Suppose we want the hash map to be in a synchronized. We want some implementation of hash map that's synchronized and that's efficient also, like in processing time. So, what's the best implementation?
So if you want synchronous hash map, there are a couple of ways of doing it. You can use either synchronized map, or you can go for concurrent hash map. As far as performance is concerned, concurrent hash map is better in performance as compared to synchronized map.
Any valid reason for that?
Yeah, so for read operations, it doesn't have any lock on the concurrent hash map, whereas for write operation, only that particular segment onto which the write operation has to be performed is logged. Rest of the map is not logged, which is why that is better in case of performance.
Okay, good. Uh, let's come to exception. Do you know errors? What are errors?
Yeah, so errors are actually that part which you cannot handle in code.
And what about exception?
Exception is something that you can actually handle, or you know you can, yeah, you can handle as part of your code. So if you talk about error is something that indicates a serious problem, that might even lead your application to crash. So you cannot manage that with a try catch block, whereas in case of exception you can use a try catch block to manage the exceptions.
Okay. Can you please tell me some examples of both type of exceptions?
Yeah, so there are two types of exceptions, mainly checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. Checked exceptions are also called as compile time exceptions, and unchecked are runtime exceptions. So, so if you talk about runtime, so they are divided by zero, null pointer, array index, out of bound. Whereas if you talk about checked exception, SQL exception, and things like that are actually part of checked exceptions.
Okay, so you must have created the customized exceptions also.
Yes.
Okay, can you please tell me the steps to create that?
Yeah, so in order to create customized exception as part of your Spring Boot application, you first have to create an exception class. Suppose I am doing it for example, bad request exception that is coming from the client and the request is malformed. So in that case, I create an exception with bad request exception, and I extend the runtime exception as part of it, and I associate a response code like 400 for bad request to it. So I'll mention like @response code in the parameters. I'll provide it as 400 bad request. So that particular exception will be associated with that code. So this @response code has to be mentioned as part of class level annotation. Apart from that, if you talk about handling them, so we do have into Spring applications, we have a controller device where we actually handle all the exceptions. So we create a controller advice, and onto that we actually have multiple exceptions as part of it. We have @exception handler annotation, where we specify what kind of exception we are going to handle. Into that you can like mention bad request or class, or whatever is your exception, custom exception that you have created. And inside that method you can generate your custom schema to return whatever you want to return. Like as part of different kind of applications, they return different kind of thing. In my application, we usually return the timestamp along with the error code, the error message, and a detailed message of what the error was, along with this whatever is actually your error, or the key that you have in your application.
Okay. Okay, let's move ahead about Java 8. What are the special features in Java 8?
So as part of Java 8, we have lambda expressions, we
Okay.
have functional interfaces,
Can you
optional.
please tell me the relation between functional interface and lambda expression?
So functional interface are actually introduced in Java 8, and we have as part of functional interface we can provide abstract, default and static methods, and lambda expressions are actually used to provide the implementation of abstract methods into a functional interface.
Okay, so next question is what is singleton class and how to implement it?
So singleton class is the class that restricts you to create multiple objects of a particular, multiple instances of a particular class. Singleton is something that actually kind of doesn't allow you to create multiple instances. If you talk about singleton class, so we can create a singleton class into Java. For that we actually have to need to have a private constructor, so that no one can actually invoke the constructor to create an object of that class. Apart from that, we need to have all the member variables as private, and the then we have to provide the get instance method in order to get the instance of that particular class. So in that get instance method, we need to have the double check to ensure that in case of multi-threaded environment, it doesn't break the singleton pattern or singleton class. Into that we actually check if the current if that instance does not exist and is equal to null, then only in that case we instantiate it. We keep this entire piece of code as part of synchronized block.
Okay, let's move to Spring questions then. Okay, so you have worked on both REST as well as SOAP, right?
Yeah.
So can you please explain me the difference between both?
Yeah, so actually REST can use JSON as well as XML for any kind of any other message, whereas SOAP has a restriction on the format of the message. It only uses the XML for message exchange format. If you talk about REST, so it doesn't have any specific format that is defined for REST. You can have any kind of format that suits you, whereas in SOAP you should actually adhere to SOAP specific format. With, like, for example, there is a SOAP envelope inside which we have a SOAP header, we have a SOAP body. So with SOAP you have to adhere to that kind of message format, whereas with REST there is no specific format that you are limited to or that you have to follow. In case of REST, you can only use HTTP. However, in case of SOAP, you can use HTTP along with any other messaging queue like Kafka, RabbitMQ, or anything. And whereas REST is kind of an architectural approach, SOAP posts restrictions on your messaging format and things like that.
Okay, so you talked about a specific format that SOAP use, right? So
Yeah.
can you please tell me that format, that what kind of format the SOAP has?
Yeah, so SOAP is actually simple object access protocol. It defines a specific way of building web services and uses XML for request exchange format. So if you talk about specifically the message exchange format of SOAP, so SOAP defines a specific request response structure, inside which, like, we have a SOAP envelope, right? With SOAP env we have a SOAP envelope, and the SOAP envelope, inside that, contains a SOAP env header, which is the header of the request. And apart from that, it contains a SOAP env body, which is the body of the request. This has to be specified as an XML.
Um, what are the different scopes of Spring Bean?
So we have there are multiple scopes of Spring Bean. Mainly we have singleton and prototype. Singleton means one instance, and whenever we do a get bean, the same instance will be returned. Apart from that, in prototype, whenever we'll do a get bean, a new instance will be returned. Apart from this, we also have request, session and global request. Session is something related to a particular session only. After that, it is no longer there. And apart from that, request is for a particular request that is coming from the client. And a global session is something that is related to
Okay. Okay. Do you know something about Spring application security? Have you worked on it?
No, I haven't worked as part of Spring Security.
Okay. How do you call API in your app, and how do you validate it?
So in order to call an API, we actually create controller, and inside the controller we have like multiple APIs like get, put, post, delete. Apart from that, like for example, there is one API, for example, post, and I'm expecting some request body as part of that API. So in order to validate that, suppose I have a customized bean, for example, an employee bean, which has name, address, employee ID, things like that associated with it. So we can use JavaX validation package that provides different set of annotations to validate different fields and attributes. Like you can actually have for example, there is @size which validates what should be the length of that particular attribute. Like if it is a string, so it should be from minimum should be 5 and maximum should be somewhere around 128. You can also validate if that is an integer or that has to be a boolean. And apart from that, there is an annotation like @min and @max for validating minimum and maximum values. @pattern is also there if you want to match some pattern like IP addresses or something like that. You want to match IPv4, IPv6 addresses. So like that, there are also multiple kind of things that are provided as part of it.
Okay. And if there are some DB errors in your application, then how do you handle them?
So in case of database related errors, we are actually making use of optimistic locking approach. We are locking each and every save, fetch transactions as part of that. And we are actually maintaining a version as part of every entity, and every save operation checks for that version, picks that version and updates it. Version gets incremented, so the next thread coming in will actually check, okay, this is the current version. And if it has some old or stale version, it throws an optimistic lock exception. So in order to deal with this problem, also we are using Spring @retriable annotation. So by default we are trying retrying 3 times. So like this you can actually ensure that every write to your database is working properly, and you have multiple retries for that as well if something is failing. And if something really fails, like even after retries it is failing, so we are actually reporting that as internal server error to the client.
Okay. So, which repository you are using in your DB? Are you using JPA repositories?
No, we are actually using Mongo repositories, but yeah, I have used JPA repository as well.
Okay. If I ask you to execute some query using your program, then how you handle that?
Yeah, so if you want to, like there are multiple inbuilt methods like find by ID, find by something, whatever you want to specify. Apart from that, if like suppose you want to write your custom query, you can use @query annotation, and inside the parameters into double quotes you can provide your query that you want to execute as part of it.
Okay. Um Okay, so one last question about Spring. Can you please explain the major annotations that you have used in your Spring Boot application? Not about the stereotypes like controller and services and all, other major annotations.
Okay, yeah, sure. So we use generally we use if you talk about Spring annotations, first one is @Spring Boot application, which is used on the application class of Spring Boot. It comprises of @enable auto configuration, @configuration, and component scan. So all these three annotations are actually part of it. Apart from that, we have rest controller to depict that this is a rest controller, and we will be having multiple endpoints as part of it. Apart from this, we have, you can also use controller, but into that you have to specify response body explicitly. Apart from that, we have like request mapping for showing any kind of mapping that we have as part of our controller endpoints. Also, we can use get mapping, put mapping, post mapping, and delete mapping. Inside that, we can actually provide the URL of the endpoint that we are creating. So and apart from that, we also have component to show that this is a Spring component, and at the time of initialization, or whenever your application starts, that will be scanned automatically if that is there on your class path, and a bean would be created out of that. Apart from this, we have like configuration for different kind of configurations that you want to specify, like DB related, or some Kafka related, or some other configurations that you make like Swagger, etc. Apart from this, we do have service, which depicts that okay, this is a service layer and it will have the business logic as part of it. Repository for the repository that you are using. Like this, we have multiple several other annotations as well. These are the main ones that we generally use.
Okay. Uh, you note two annotations like request body and path param. So what's the difference between both of them?
Yeah, so request body is something related to whatever request you are getting from the client. So into your method parameters, you can provide request body, and if you are taking it as string, you can provide string. And path param is something that is part of your URL. So suppose you have slash employee slash into curly braces ID. ID is dynamic, so that will be part of path param. Also, we have query param as part of it. So in that, we have like in the request, we have in the end question mark, and after that we can have like key equal to value, like that we can specify the query param.
Okay. Have you done something on backup and restore? Can you please tell me something about backup and restore in your Spring Boot application?
Yeah. So at times, backup and restore is very crucial for a microservice based architecture applications. So we are currently using MongoDB as part of our database. So into that, we are performing backup and restore. We have a separate service which actually takes care of backup and restoration. So as soon as so we are actually using Mongo. So there are Mongo tools that are provided, that is Mongo dump and Mongo restore. So Mongo dump is actually used to take the dump of all the databases that are there into your MongoDB. It actually creates a backup. You can either take it into a directory, or you can take it as a tar.gz file. So using a simple Mongo dump command from your Java code, you can take a backup of it. And apart from that, you can also restore using the Mongo restore tool. So these are pretty handy to take the backup and restore just by a couple of commands that you can execute, and that will restore your entire database. So at times, when there is some data loss, or your application goes down, and you lose the data from the database, and you want to restore it from the backup, So in that case, in order to avoid data loss, we use this Mongo dump and Mongo restore.
Okay. Tell me something about the design patterns that you have used in your application.
Okay, so design patterns are actually the common problems. They are actually the best practices to the common problems that each and every developer face during the development phase. So I have mainly worked on creational design pattern, for example, I've used Singleton, prototype, factory, abstract factory, uh, things like that.
What about builder?
Yeah, I have used Builder as well.
Okay, so can you please explain any one other than Singleton? Any one of your choice?
Yeah, sure. So, like for example, I'll just go through the factory design pattern. So, into factory
Okay,
design
okay,
pattern.
okay. Do one thing. Please tell me the difference between factory and abstract factory. What's the main difference? Why we are going for abstract factory?
Yeah, so actually, abstract factory is easier to extend as compared to a factory. So, in factory, we have multiple implementations of a particular, like for example, an interface, and we have a factory class into which entire factory design pattern is dependent, where we take the decision of which implementation we have to invoke. Whereas in case of abstract factory, we have multiple factories that for each kind of implementation. So in case you have a factory design pattern and you have too many implementations, so the maintenance and if you want to extend that code, there will be a lot of checks into your factory class, because that is a single class which takes all the decisions. So there will be a lot of code that unnecessary, and it will create complexity into your factory class. Whereas abstract factory, you can have multiple. If you want to extend it, you want to add a new implementation, you can simply add a new implementation along with its factory in case of abstract factory. So it is pretty easy to extend, and it is more loosely coupled as compared to factory design pattern, and it actually removes the burden from the client, that is a single factory class to make all the decisions. There are multiple factories into which you can take your decision.
Okay, okay. So
Abstract factory actually provides the abstraction of factories, whereas factory pattern provides abstraction for concrete products.
okay, okay. So that's all from my side for the day. That's all. Thanks for your time.